Welcome back to Windows on the World. I'm now with Dr. Nick Collister, and we're going to talk about the Jo Cox murder and the details of that, which haven't been really reported in any clarity in the press, and also the way it's been used politically. So, Nick, welcome to Windows on the World.
Well, it's a pleasure to be back here again, Mark. And we're looking at a PSYOP which had a massive effect on the Brexit vote.
For anyone out there who doesn't know what a PSYOP is, can you explain that?
It means that it was designed to have an effect on the psyche of the British people.
So you think that the event wasn't just random?
Totally, yeah. It was designed, it appeared on 666, 16th June 2016, and the whole thing, the way it unfolded, we got an apparent death, massive media coverage. The next day we had a funeral. We have Corbyn and Cameron up in Leeds the very next day with flowers. When do you get a funeral event the day after? The day after that, we had a Marylebone Magistrates Court. We had this suspect, Thomas Meyer, in Marylebone Magistrates Court making...
It was Westminster, wasn't it?
Marylebone.
Okay.
And why wasn't he tried in Leeds? Why was it suddenly arranged? Marylebone should take months to book an appearance there. How come they had that suddenly the very next day? The day after that, we had Parliament recalled to discuss this Jo Cox murder. Then we had the 22nd, it was her birthday, so all around planet Earth there were birthday celebrations, you know, Washington, South America.
That was something that is
Brussels,
very strange for someone who's just an MP. Because the Americans didn't know who she was, really. No. I mean, CNN actually stated that she was a British lawmaker.
Yeah,
you know,
none of us hadn't really heard of her. And then amazingly, amazingly, the Brexit vote still held, thank God. But on the 16th, I was reading a 6-point majority of Brexit, and that was successfully shattered. If you consider the way a PSYOP was conducted, Mark, immediately the ex-husband, he didn't show any sign whatever of grief, and he started talking about Remain, the Remain campaign, and we must work against hate, which is a very sort of political kind of...
He actually said we need to fight against the hate that killed her, which was a peculiar and quite a manipulative statement.
It's a manipulative statement, and in 2 ticks, all the media coverage was about hate equals little Englanders who are in favour of Britain first, and there were fascists, there were Nazis, and then they framed him as being a Nazi, this Thomas Meyer. He was supposed to have Nazi background. Suddenly, he was painted with a Nazi background.
Yes, I think it was Jada Franson from Britain First who actually said that this guy had nothing to do with them. But there was one website which actually claims that there is a Britain First group, and he is amongst those people. Have you seen that? Do you know about that?
One website, yeah, dodgy looking picture, but that group itself denied it and do them. Yeah. So he was framed Nazi. So the whole PSYOP was done that let's be together, let's stay together, let's show love. Love means being in with the EU, and let's not give way to hate. And hate means petty little England politics of these white racist Nazi isolationists. And we were given that terrific polarity. We were drenched in loads of phony emotion about the grief of the death of this woman. And it didn't work.
Not really. I don't think it did. But just another few quotes from Brendan Cox. He said it was an act of terror designed to advance hate towards others. He said, "What a beautiful irony it is that an act designed to advance hatred has in fact instead generated an outpouring of love." I mean, these statements are just well-constructed sound bites. Merely propaganda.
He never showed any sign of grief. In fact, couldn't see any sign of grief in the family. They're reading out a script or whatever. And I've never seen a death which I had less feeling that anyone had died. Could we perhaps just go over some of the stories?
Let's go into some of the detail, Nick. Yes.
Well, the neighbours were talking about this fella. Pleasant, sociable chap he is. He's not a loner. He'd always talk to you about, give you gardening advice, do voluntary work in the local gardens. The bit of psychological help he had was just for depression, that's all.
Yes.
Just treated for depression, which we all get. And he did voluntary work, and he gave people helpful advice in their gardens. He had no particular interest in politics. No one can remember him expressing an opinion about Brexit or whatever. Everyone who knew him, without exception, could not square this deed at all with what they knew about him. And a neighbour said, who last saw him, person who last ever saw him, said, "Oh, I thought he was going to try to help this MP Joe Cox in some way." So my hunch would be that he was captured somehow on the way and maybe drugged up. I don't accept that he had a 1 foot long knife and that he stabbed her 7 times with it. I don't accept that he had a handmade gun. This is all the story we were given. I don't think there was any blood anywhere. That's the first thing that struck me. She was getting out of her car, and then the South Yorkshire Police came out with a statement that she got out of her car with 2 other people. 3 of them got out of the car, and they were walking towards this library. I'm showing a picture of the library, which had full windows all the way along, so if our constituents were waiting in the library, they would have seen what happened, and do we hear anything from them? And there was the pavement. This came out in the Daily Mirror on the 16th. This is the Mirror online, 16th, the very day. They showed a picture of the library, not a drop of blood on the pavement, absolutely nothing.
Yes. Now, the other thing also, which is very important, is the tattoos and the photograph that seems to have been used of the police capturing him. He doesn't seem to have had the tattoos. But what struck me...
Have you noticed that we only shown one picture of him? Always just the one picture, the guy with the white hat, facing us, looking vaguely puzzled and
with very large gloves
friendly.
on. Yeah.
Large gloves. And that's the only picture.
Well, what's interesting about this is the way that the police also reported it, because they were actually saying that they were given their information basically through the media. And this is something that seems to be happening all the time now. The media seem to generate the story and the police then pick it up.
Yeah. Okay, well, the story the police came out with was that they had arrested the suspect 1 mile away. They caught him 1 mile from the events, if you remember, and they recognised him by a black baseball cap with blood on it. And they claimed to find a bit of blood in his pocket or whatever. But, I mean, if he had stabbed Joe Cox with a knife 7 times, wrestling onto the floor, that's what we're told, he'd have blood all over his shirt, everywhere. There's no way he could walk through a city for a mile in the middle of the day at noon in a condition like that. And furthermore, without leaving any trail of blood anywhere, and the police did not report any blood on him.
Well, it's the woman who was with her, who was some kind of advisor, it's reported in one of the newspaper stories, was that there was a lot of blood. And she was losing blood.
There was a report, yeah.
Yes.
One of the witnesses said there was blood everywhere. But if you notice, she said it on the pavement. See, if I may, there were several different locations where this event was alleged to have happened, which is a part of an argument that it didn't happen. After the initial reports, which, as far as I could tell, said that it happened on the pavement in front of the library, then police photographs came out showing stuff remaining in the middle of a road, and various bits of tape all around, as if something had happened in the middle of a road. And we shown some shoes in the middle of the road as remain. Then there's a third story that she had tried to run away, and it ends up in a car park. And then there was some sort of triage or police cars in a car park. So there were different stories of where it happened, and I think, yes, there was one story came out at one point that they had arrested him or held him near the library, but I think it's fair to say that the main story was that they caught him 1 mile away.
Yes, and it brings us back again to why aren't the police in there on the ground interviewing witnesses straight away, which they don't appear to be doing.
No, they would say, excuse me, these people, there's supposed to be a cafe, there is a cafe next to that library, and people are supposed to come out and see this guy with a white baseball cap, wrestling this guy to wrestling Joe Cox to the ground. And so that doesn't fit too well with the police seeing this guy with a black baseball cap. I suggest that all the kind of details were given. For example, can you answer how many people were there? You can't really. You've just got different stories.
Can you tell us a bit about the older guy who's meant to intervene, the 77-year-old?
Yeah, okay. Bernard Kenny.
Yes.
Who had a birthday the same day as Joe Cox, 22nd June, allegedly. He came out of that cafe, allegedly. and got stabbed in his lung and was taken off to the hospital. And I mean, I can't say anything more than that. That's just an alleged
There's
story.
not too much been reported about that, other than there's a fundraiser petition to get him some kind of medal.
Yeah.
You know, for this intervention.
Yeah.
But
Well, also, perhaps point out, a report was that she was airlifted to the local hospital, to the hospital in Leeds, local general infirmary, not the local hospital, and so that just became part of the story, and that's kind of impossible. Where could a helicopter have come down, or put her on a stretcher, lifted her up? There are no photographs at all of any of this, and it goes without saying, Mark, that we haven't got any CCTV. We expect that. But I would expect, if the police wanted anyone to believe their story, they would release at least 1 or 2 CCTV pictures showing Mayer in the area. Was he anywhere in the area? Had Joe Cox got out of the car? Can we just see a CCTV indicating that? And as with various other alleged terror events, you might expect in the middle of the day for somebody to have taken a picture, but this doesn't happen.
this is a key point, and so there's no CCTV and there's no camera phone footage. Now, this happens quite a lot when these events happen now, and I don't know whether she was killed or not.
Well, the person who identified the body
yes.
was allegedly the sister.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen the video of the next day at this funeral type event.
Yeah.
And the sister can't keep a straight face. You know, she's reading out stuff. She's thrilled and she's happy. And the mother is also quite amused by it all. No trace of grief anywhere. And a lot of web comments, people just don't believe that sister has identified the dead body of Joe Cox.
They certainly didn't look like people who were grieving.
No.
There was something very odd about all that, but that brings us to the background of her and her husband or ex-husband, and what sort of people they were. They seem to be pretty much Blairite in their views, or globalists. He was at the World Economic Forum. He's a development consultant for them. And he spouts diversity, globalization. He's basically a change agent. He believes in entrepreneurship in the global public interest and promotes social entrepreneurs. And there's something very, very contrived about the stuff he did to camera and the quotes that came out. And it was used in this very childish political way.
2 hours after the event, what did he do? He posts up on Twitter a picture of his wife smiling, happy, resting on the barge, which is their home, by the river. Now, do you really do that after the death of your wife? Post a smiling, happy picture of her 2 hours later? Or is that a kind of signal to everyone who in the know, look, don't worry, she's all right, you know?
Well, there's a lot of anomalies there, and you've gone into most of them. The thing is, this was used as a political basically for the Remain camp, and it was basically saying that people who voted Brexit were some kind of terrorist extremists. And that's really what was being promoted out of her death, or as you believe, that it may be some kind of psychological operation on the public.
Yeah, well, just consider the contacts you've described.
Yeah.
She worked for some Bill Gates type company.
Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Yeah, they're both high up with influential people. Let me suggest that when you do get up in that kind of realm, you can be the Empire can tap you on the shoulder and say, look, I'm afraid there's a favour we want to ask of you. It's for the greater cause. Billions and billions are involved, keeping Britain in the EU, and I'm afraid we're going to have to ask you to do this for us. And she just vanishes, and we don't see any pictures of a dead body. We don't see any. I haven't seen any grief at all. No blood on the street anywhere. I mean, absurd theatrical story of this guy Mayer with a huge knife with a 12-foot long blade covered in blood.
12-inch long blade, yeah.
12-inch long blade, and nobody sees it. Or just very dodgy witnesses. I mean, there's nothing like. I suggest this is not a real event, you know. And the way the media come out in absolute chorus about it. And the diversity of the stories, the different stories, such as was she airlifted, you know.
Well, we're not given
they don't
anything
fit together.
to really get our teeth into. There's no real information being conveyed by the police, and basically the police are saying there to the papers that the case is going to be heard under the terrorism protocols. Now, what are the terrorism protocols?
I'll tell you one thing for sure,
Yeah.
Mark. It means that Mayor is silent. You want to talk. You want to hear Mayor speak. You want in front of a microphone and be asked. For example, did you order far right literature from America? Yes or no? You know, we'd like him just to say that. Quite apart from, did you want to?
This was years ago, wasn't it? This was about 8 or 10 years ago.
I mean, that's another.
And that was brought in by was it the Southern Poverty Law Centre who
that's
brought that
another
up?
conclusive proof that the whole thing is framed. That went on a website on the 16th, the very day of the event. The Southern Poverty Law Centre, the other side of the world, when this guy's just a suspect, it claimed to have receipts of 17 years ago. Suddenly receipts go up on their website.
It's strange how they popped up, isn't it? We're going to take a short break and we'll see you in a couple of minutes. Our next guest, Nasrin, was evicted from her own property. This was due to a management company issuing charges which she disputed.
The lady called for assistance from the police and she's now been arrested, handcuffed, took out of her own home.
The student loans, the debt book has been sold. All of what we've talked about is coming your way.
Sergeant?
Have a seat. Don't actually necessarily go into a police station at this time.
What has she been arrested for?
Well, that video was very shocking because Nasrin was actually peacefully occupying her own property and she was arrested for breach of the peace in her own house.
It's very painful to watch because in that instance I realised something terrible is happening in this country.
We did a show about people getting their doors kicked in by the police on behalf of private interests without proper court warrants, and this is actual fact. This is happening.
It's illegal and it's corrupt. And you have to ask yourself, why are the people who are willing to bust in people's doors, what the hell happened to them?
You actually called me after they were smashing the door down. Yeah. We actually got a phone call into their press office, and first of all they said the police would never do that. However, they've been caught on video doing just that. The second time we called, they said if the police did that, it would be criminal damage. So you've just witnessed criminal damage by the police. Welcome back to Windows on the World. We're talking about the murder of Joe Coxon with Dr. Nick Colostrum, and we've had quite an interesting introduction there to what this is all about and what's been said, what hasn't been said, how it's been reported by the police and the anomalies in the story. We're now going to go back to what this guy actually said, Thomas Mayer. He was allegedly yelling out Britain first when he accosted Joe Cox.
Didn't it?
Yes.
And then, oh no, whoops, he didn't say it after all. And the chap with a local cafe put up a notice in his window saying, at no point did anyone shout out Britain first.
That's right, yes, he did.
So that was part of
There was another two witnesses though, Nick. Can you tell us a bit about them?
Well, two people came out of the cafe, didn't they? And alleged that one of them alleged they struggled to rescue the Joe Cox, and the other I think just kept a distance. We've mentioned the one Kenny who got a knife.
Yes, but it was this guy, Mr. Rothwell, I think, who maintained that he had said. You had heard someone say, the mayor say Britain first. He alleges it was Mayor that said Britain first,
Right,
Thomas Mayer.
right.
Yeah. And
the other two who allegedly got out of the car with Joe Cox, they don't seem to have said much, do they? Haven't heard much from them.
No, there isn't much, and I've been to quite a lot of the papers. Yeah.
That mad-sounding cry was then echoed in the court case, wasn't it? Marylebone Court, when he said "death to traitors" and
Freedom for Britain.
That
was at Westminster Magistrates Court on the Saturday.
Westminster.
Yes.
On the Saturday.
Yes.
Right.
And on the 23rd, at the Old Bailey on Monday, he confirmed his name as Thomas Mayer, but that was via video link from Belmarsh Prison.
Yeah, I noticed the first one, he didn't confirm his name, did he?
No.
He just, and that might have been some actor or double in the court crying out "death to traitors." He wasn't keen on perjuring himself on oath about his name being Thomas Mayer. I just suggest that as a possibility.
Well, it's a very interesting one.
Because it doesn't remotely resemble the character that everybody knew as Thomas Mayer.
Yeah.
a quite gentle fellow without interest in politics.
I mean, the thing that's most striking about that is the way it's been propagandised. So who benefited from that? Who actually benefited from it? And really, what's interesting as well is that Thomas Mayer was meant to be some far right, you know,
Yeah.
he was some kind of Nazi extremist, you know. But if you look at the background of these two, Joe and Brendan Cox, it would be more likely that they would have a Muslim extremist doing it because of their views and what they've done. With her, she's voted for bombing Syria.
Yeah, but hang on,
Yes.
they wanted to create the image of the right-wing, reactionary, far-right Nazi.
I'm throwing this in
who wanted who wanted Brexit.
So it
That
makes
was the purpose of him being
yes,
white.
but I'm trying to make sense of it in the broader picture.
You're right. Generally, that the
Yes.
image. Obviously, we're all used to the Muslim terrorist who yells "Allah Akbar," and people come to accept that as feasible.
No, I meant that would actually make more sense with the views of these two. See what I'm trying to say here is that in a rational sense, if you look at the background and what they are and what they've said and who they've been involved with, it would make more sense if they were going to set up a patsy for it to be a Muslim, in my opinion. But of course, they're trying to blacken people like Farage, who just want to get out of Europe, as and anybody who votes against Remain is an extremist, as reported by people like Angela Merkel, and of course all the Blairites.
Well, whenever they're creating a patsy, you get a fake identity put onto them of hatred and extremism and so on, and the real person gets lost. The real person is forgotten, and I always feel that is what we need to try and rescue. We need to get a real biography of Thomas Mayer, of who he really was, because I doubt we'll ever hear him speak again. Okay, he's probably drugged up to the eyeballs now with stuff, and I think there is due at the end of this year. There is due to be some court hearing, and they will carefully monitor what he said. Notice that the judge, what was her name, Lady Buthnot, was the same. We heard at the Maryland Magistrates Court on the 18th. That's the same who presided over the Lee Rigby trial.
A very, very good point there.
And also, it's the same who let off that bent House of Lords bent Jewish paedophile, horrible paedophile, and she let him off. So that could be the reason why this fellow Mayer was brought down to London to be tried by this judge.
Yes, for anyone who thinks that's a bit far-fetched, I'd like to bring attention to something here, Nick, that's very important, because in the lower courts, or the high courts, but we're talking about things that are civil which become criminal, there are a cabal of judges who we actually know about on this show, who are working against the interests of the public and as a cabal, basically stealing property. So if this could actually go higher up the judiciary, then what you're saying is not really out of the realms of logic, you know.
My hunch would be that when he had that extraordinary outburst on the 18th at the Magistrates Court, that no members of the public were there. That would be my hunch, that it was partly because it was called so suddenly, we weren't expecting it, that it was either a closed court or a court without any members of the public. And obviously we're wondering, did he really say that? Did anybody really shout that out in a court?
I didn't see anywhere that it said in a packed public gallery or anything like that.
But let's just make the general point. It's terribly important. The justice is a public event, must be seen, and as and when this fellow Mayer does come to trial, let's try to be there at least some of the time. Normally these people just sit through the trial silent, and there's nothing much they're allowed to say. They're just given the verdict and told how bad they are. But nonetheless, we do need to try and be there at such a trial.
Yes, this reminds me a little bit of the Jill Dando Barry George scenario, where he was kind of this projected onto him that he was kind of this obsessive simpleton, and of course he was completely innocent. And the police in that case, when it started, knew that. I have some information that was given to me at the time that the police actually were not really interested in Barry George.
Right. Yeah.
So they couldn't find anybody, and of course we find that now he was innocent.
Right, yeah. Okay, well in practical
Or not
terms, Mark,
guilty.
let's urge anyone up in Leeds sort of truth group, because obviously that's where the old London bombing story was kind of hatched, or a lot of the story narrative took place up there. Let's urge them to try and ask practical, realistic questions. For example, asking the police if they can release any image with a trace of blood anywhere, or if they can define where exactly they think the struggle took place. Can they pinpoint it? Or possibly ask Leeds Infirmary to show the receipt which they filled in when the body was brought to them at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the 16th from a helicopter, if it was from a helicopter. Can they show us the receipt? These kind of practical details, which presumably cannot be produced because I surmise none of it happened, but the refusal is important. If you ask these questions politely in a written letter or with witnesses, and you get a refusal, that's as much as you can do.
Yes.
You know, so we try to get practical, realistic details. I suggest, for example, who was the last person who ever saw Thomas Mayer? We might not. We're not sure whether we'll ever see him again, and we're slightly worried that at a trial it might be some sort of double who stands in front of him. You know, these kind of practical details at this point that we want to try and.
Well, the public need full disclosure of what's happening in these cases because they're not getting any disclosure.
No.
And the police are being fed, as we said at the start of the show, by the media. They're fed a story by the media, which they then report. Now it's their job to investigate these things and to present the evidence to the public.
Well, it's terribly difficult. Once the whole government has told the police who's guilty, this is the trouble with the war on terror, you see. The whole, the traditional investigative way in which the police worked has been kind of hijacked by the war on terror and the counter-terror command of Scotland Yard. Yeah. The police are told who's guilty, and they're told they're fighting a war on terror, and it's terribly difficult to pursue the normal course of action. I mean, for example, the day after the event on the 17th, they said they had arrested the suspect. They got the suspect. Now, if they found him there outside the library with blood all over him and a huge knife, they wouldn't be calling him a suspect, would they?
Well, that has to be decided by the jury.
Well, okay.
Allegedly.
Yeah, if there is
Now,
a jury,
the
yeah.
thing is, as well, Nick, as we're going to wrap this up for this section, is that the only thing we know about Thomas Mayer was from a local newspaper. In 2010, he was a volunteer at Oakwell Hall as a gardener. And it was through the Murfield Pathways Day Centre for adults with mental health problems. And he stated at the time, it's done me more good than all the psychotherapy and medication in the world.
Yeah.
And that was in 2010.
He sounds quite a decent guy, really, I'd say.
Well, we'll never know that.
Thanks to Windows on the World.
Keep watching those, watching us, watching Windows on the World, and we'll see you soon.